Hey Tom, welcome.
Hi, Chris. Great to be here. Looking forward to our, always looking forward to our chats.
We have some good discussions, and I love we have the outline and we know what points you're going to get to and all that stuff. But a lot comes out in the conversation as we kick around the topic, and we hear from a lot of contractors. Obviously, we work with a lot of contractors, and so I think what a lot of people get out of these discussions is perspective. What's happening in the
Mhm.
industry? Am I the only
Sure.
one? That whole am I the only one syndrome.
Right.
We all
Right.
wonder sometimes, am I the only one who does this thing? Am I the only one who has these problems? But I think we could lend perspective, especially on this topic of signing on the spot.
Mm.
And not everybody does it. Not
Yep.
everybody should do it necessarily, but let's kind of, yeah,
I think there's a song with those lines in it, isn't
it probably is.
there?
So, well, let me ask you, why is signing on the spot important? Is it important?
It can be very important. Obviously, if you get your prospect to sign on the spot, then there's no opportunity for anyone else to close the deal. A competitor or whatever. Um, it shortens your sales cycle if you close on the spot. So you don't have as long to wait until you finally hear if they're going to do it. Um, I think it does depend partly on the type of work that it is and how long it takes to do your estimates or proposals. Because um, if you're not comfortable going to the customer, evaluating what the work is, on the spot, it's going to be hard to close the deal on the spot unless you actually do it like a sequence of multiple visits, where the first visit is to get the information and the second visit is to do a presentation. There's different. Closing on the spot can be made up of different animals. And one animal is, hey, I go out, I do it, I do the estimate, I show it to the customer, get them to sign. That's one model. The other model is I send an estimator out, the estimator does their work, and then I come in or the estimator comes back with a presentation and works on getting a signature on the spot. That again, there's a little more time obviously involved in that operation, but in some cases you really need more than, depending upon the size of the estimate and what's involved in it, you may need more than, the time it takes to do it and have those folks still stay, hanging out there waiting for you to complete your estimate.
Okay,
It's
and
going
do
to
you
vary.
think, I know there's some options there, and I want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about the different types, but it sounds like maybe if there's an option, or maybe this is an assumption of mine, if there's an
Mm-hmm.
option to sign on the spot, and if it works for you and you have the tool to do it,
Mm-hmm.
should you develop that as an option, as a kind of a turnkey option that you know how to use, when to
Yeah.
use it? Is that something maybe we could say universally that probably, if you're the type of business that has those types of projects and you have the tool to do it, you should probably know how to do that, sign on the
Oh,
spot. Is that
absolutely.
fair, maybe as a starting point?
Oh, absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, there's no question that that's not an effective method of selling.
Okay.
But part of it depends upon you, though. Not
Right.
everybody is a, close on the spot person. It definitely takes the professional sales mentality to do that.
Right.
Personally, I'd have a hard time doing that because that's kind of not my makeup. But that doesn't mean it can't be done very effectively, and it can be done in a way that isn't, pushy or makes the customer feel uncomfortable or something like they're committing to something that they shouldn't be committing, like they're being forced to decide too quickly. It can be done in a good way. It's tricky to do.
I imagine too, if you have a good process and a good system, I mean, I'm not trying to constantly refer back to EstimateRocket software, but if you have the right
Sure.
tool that it's kind of structured to where you can crank out numbers really fast, show it to
Right.
somebody, give them the
Yeah.
option without doing a hard sell, even if you
Right.
don't like have the sales training or you don't feel like it's your personality, but it's like
Sure.
an option that they have. It might
Right.
it might kind of skip that step of having to do the hard sell, I guess.
No, I mean it's a very powerful tool. I mean, if you've got your estimating process down, and this can be for wide variety of trades. Certainly painting. We have concrete lifters that a lot of them do the close on the spot approach. Um, uh, Obviously handyman type folks and Um, you know, roofing might be a tricky one to do on the spot. You'd have to really have things dialed in, know exactly how your process worked, or you use the two-phase process where the estimate is done sort of prior to the sales visit,
Okay.
and then the sales visit you work on closing the deal,
Oh, that's
and that
not a
saves
bad.
you yeah, and that saves you a lot of time. Obviously, anytime you can get it done when you're there, obviously it's going to save you some time. You don't want to have to make 3 visits to the customer site to close it. So if it's one of those situations where you feel like you're going to have to, come back and make that personal presentation multiple times, that gets painful. Um, and I think there's a lot to be said for, and I know a lot of people will ask the questions up front. I know Tom Reber's really big on, getting the customer doing like a pre-qualification phone call with the person to find out if they're
Mm,
really, if they're a real prospect. Because obviously, this whole estimating and sales follow-up process takes a lot of time. So
right.
you don't want to waste your time. And if you can pre-qualify them to a point where you feel really comfortable that, you're going to that if you present things in the right way, that this person is, going to be able to afford what your price is, and is interested in working with you. If you can get that out of the way up front, and even price bracketing, which I know is another pre-qualification tool that people use, where they say, well, these jobs typically go from $5,000 to $10,000, or 10 to $30,000, or depending upon, because if it's a remodel job, fact, you have no idea what you can give them the idea of the build out, probably based on space and some square footage and linear foot measurements, but there's no way you're going to know what they're going to want to use for appliances. So,
Mm.
but again, a lot of people will handle that with we've got the, high, medium, and low package for appliances. So which option are you interested in? That's going to give you your ballpark price. So
I'm,
a lot of
I'm
different
here.
techniques for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, kind of what I'm hearing from you is there's a few things that can help. One, knowing what type of projects lend itself to sign on the spot.
Hmm. Yeah,
Pre-qualification assists that process. So in other words, you're moving the
huge.
conversation back a little bit to where
Yeah,
instead of them being like this barrage of information and new stuff all at one setting, then say, hey, do you want to do this?
right,
You
right.
started the conversation earlier with pre-qualification, which is there's a lot of good tools out there. Matter of fact,
Yeah,
Groundwork is a excellent video pre-qualification tool that actually customers can, I think they download something on their side and they can take
right,
videos of what they're looking for, and you can start reviewing and assessing that
right.
before you get there, start preparing people. Do you think
Sure.
also one help, I mean, if there's anything else in pre-qualification, I'd like to know, but one thought is um it's almost escaping me here. It is, oh, I know, content creation, because content is king. We're all about content. EstimateRocket puts out tons of content like this podcast, and we're expanding even the content of this podcast to video. It's already,
Yep.
audio. We put little clips here and there. So it's all about you create a little bit and make a lot out of that. But
Right.
as companies are doing more of that and arming their customers with information to know how to assess, the different contractors that are giving bids, like how do I know it's the right kind of a bid? How do I know
Right.
when it's fair? How do I know when it's really meeting my needs or this company's really good? But do you think that offering more of that kind of content um, via links or emails or text or whatever before you get to that estimate could help as well?
Oh,
Informing
sure.
the customer? Okay.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people will do a pre-meeting campaign to the customer or the prospect of a variety of different things, maybe examples of your work in their area, some stuff about their procedures, what to expect when we do work for you. And you can lay out kind of that you're a white glove company and everything's taken care of. And, we wear booties when we come into your house, and those kinds of things. Those kinds of things can all help to set the customer's expectations ahead of time, sort of to soften them up for when you get there to do your presentation. So that
Is there
that
anything
stuff
else?
definitely helps.
Okay. Is there anything else that can help a customer? I mean, again, given
Hmm,
that this might be an option for your company, and though it doesn't
sure.
fit all cases, is there anything else that kind of can help move things towards a sign on the spot situation?
You really, again, depending upon the type of thing you're going to do, if you're going to try to do it in a one shot, you really have to have your process dialed in for what you do from the minute you pull in the driveway till the minute you present them something. And that's a step by step. Okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do a quick meet and greet, 3 minutes. Then I'm going to say, let's go evaluate your project and look at the spaces. Then, depending upon the type of estimate it is, you may have to say, okay, give me a couple minutes in this room, and then we'll move on to the next room, or this area. We'll move on to the next area, or exterior. Okay, great. Get an idea what you're looking for. Give me about 15 minutes or a half hour, whatever it's going to take, whatever it's going to take you to do a walk around and get all the details for you. And then I can propose you. You
Mm,
really have to know that. You really have to have a process for that. And that process is, that's an outline. Then you're going to probably have some tools that you're going to use to implement that process.
yeah. Okay. And I mean, there are tools out there. We're one that we've built, EstimateRocket, to anticipate that
Right. Right.
opportunity. I know Nick May at Walls by Design has a very um, really articulated system, very
Hmm.
clear steps when their estimators go in there. It's almost like a
Right.
checklist. You're doing these things. You're talking to the customers about these
Yeah.
things. This is how, and I
Absolutely.
forget if he does sign on the spot or not.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, yeah, that could, again, if you need time and they need to be informed and they need to feel prepared, we'll take the
Right.
whole course of the estimating procedure to do that. And actually, as you were talking about that, it reminds me, I think it was Paris Painting.
Hmm.
They did a presentation at a conference called Paint by Numbers, and they were talking about their estimating process. And when they're going around on exteriors and they're talking to people about what they're going to be doing, each step of the way, each side of the building,
Yep.
they're talking to the person and saying, does this sound right to you? They're getting feedback. They're actually
Right.
making it very interactive to where the person is giving small yeses all throughout. To when it comes
Right.
time for a big yes, they're primed. They're
Right.
kind of they're ready to go, or
That
they're
makes
warmed up
perfect
to it.
sense. Yeah.
So
Love
I
it.
like David extended, but it does require tons of planning, doesn't it?
It really does. You really got to have you really have to have a script done out that not out every word you're going to say, but all of the steps that you're going to take from the time you get there till, the time you leave. Otherwise, you're going to flounder, and then the customer is going to sense that because you're trying to work too quickly, or you're not, you're going back to things. You kind of want it to be sequenced in a moving forward way. And if you don't have that sequence done out, you're going to be going back to some step. They're going to, oh, well, why didn't you ask me that earlier when we were covering those other things? So, really having your ducks lined up for that stuff before you go in. Obviously, you're going to have to do a few trials. You're going to have to go see a few customers
Yeah.
to get that process nailed down. You're not going to, it's not going to be perfect the first time you do it. But over time, you keep tweaking those processes. And before you know it, you've got this thing that's just a well oiled machine that, helps you close those deals every time on the spot.
Okay, so are there any challenges to doing this that we haven't mentioned yet? One is they may have not tried it yet. I mean, even having a trial and error saying, hey, does this process work? Let me try that out there and
Right.
hone my process. Anything other things that might be challenges that people need to work through and trying to create that as an option?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest part of that is it kind of depends upon what type of job it is. I'm sure there's jobs that are so complex to, like, maybe a good
Mhm.
example would be a foundation repair. So you're going to end up having to get an engineer on the site to come out and evaluate some of the things that are going to have to be done. There's a lot of, there's a lot more technical things involved to do that estimate. So that's going to be a hard one to close on this. Again, we talk about close on the spot, but there are two kinds of close on the spot. There's the I go out, I see him, I greet him, I estimate it, I quote him, and I get signed. That's one. The other one is the two phase where you've got this, first round of either qualifications and or, site visit to see what's going on. And then you come back and you may have to figure out what technology I'm going to use for this. And again, it really depends upon, it's very, very trade specific in terms of which ones really lend themselves to closing on the spot and which ones you gotta, you know, do a two phase for.
Well, then let me ask you, when you talk about phases, if
Hmm.
you miss the sign on the spot opportunity, or they say
Hmm.
no, or you
Sure.
know that that's not the right time to sign on the spot, that you have, what are the next pieces? Like, what do we see people doing and what do we think is best practices for what
Sure.
should come after sign on the spot if you didn't nail it then?
Yeah, I mean, like any other aspect of your project with your client is communications. You got to clearly establish what you're going to do next for them. If it's something that you just didn't have all the information for, or one of the decision makers wasn't present, or something like that, you just have to make sure you're communicating, uh, frequently with the customer, and make sure that they know what's going to happen next, and that they're in tune, and set their expectations for what your expectations are in terms of what the next steps are to get it completed. So it's really communications, and early and often is my catchphrase for how communication should be done. You really want to be communicating with them frequently.
Yeah, and I think, that could sound overwhelming to some people to think like, well, how do I do that? How do I keep up
Mm,
with, once I do the job, I'm on to the next job and I've got my team moving on to the next thing. Everybody's moving
right.
forward. But I think part of that isn't it about automation,
Yeah,
making sure you're setting
absolutely.
something in process. And that starts at the beginning too. I mean,
Right.
one, having a tool that does that, Estimate Rocket does that. But
Right.
you really do have to have something that you set in motion from the time you get the customer or you get the lead, and
Right.
then communicating that, we have it in Estimate Rocket that every stage of the lead communication, scheduling the estimate, doing the actual estimate, any kind of
Right.
follow up, like everything sets off its own campaign that
Right.
you can just wait on that period, but it's being worked for you. So that
Right.
would be a big important part of that. Wouldn't you say?
Oh, totally.
Otherwise,
I,
it's
I,
overwhelming to think about doing all that yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Without automated and automated, follow up procedures are at every phase of the project. It's not really just at sales time. It's at sales time. It's after you close, before you start the work. It's while you're doing the work. It's after you've done the work, and then it's ongoing to, keep that customer coming back for more.
Even
So it really
after
never ends.
even after the close of the project and final invoice and all that stuff, you'll want
Absolutely.
something dripping to them still to say, "When's the
Right.
next one?"
Yeah, I mean, you just got to be reaching out to them on a regular basis, because especially in general in home services, people are constantly doing different things to their properties, depending upon what your trade is. But painting, for obviously, that's a recurring, thing.
Yeah.
Outside, it's almost like on a calendar. You can easily predict when they're going to need more work done on their exterior. It's almost like the person who do it if you have oil heat, that somebody how do they know to come and fill my tank again? Well, they
Right.
actually have a system where they
Yeah.
put in how many gallons they added. What do they call them? Degree days. They calculate. The government produces this degree day index that will tell you how much heating you're going to need between this time, over
Mm,
this period of time, and they can calculate it out pretty close.
wow.
So they know exactly when you're going to need your next oil fill.
So that's a lot of, again, the premise of what Estimate Rocket was built for, to help automate a lot of those things. And yeah, it's a lot to
Absolutely.
stay up
Yeah.
on top. I know people get overwhelmed when they think like, oh, it's one thing to start the job or to finally land the job. Now I got to keep on.
Right.
Well, hopefully you have the software tools, resources that help you do that, because
Right.
it's impossible to do manually all these things you have to be doing.
Oh, for
Talk to me
sure.
real quick about, um, I mean, this idea is kind of an afterthought maybe, but maybe closing on the spot, part of the problem too is all the objections that come up,
Hmm.
when people are like all the reasons why they shouldn't do it. Maybe
Right.
maybe that's a little bit more of the not easier, but you do have to have kind of a sales mindset and have a prepared script to handle objections. Does that help kind of
Right.
through the process
I
to sign on
think
the spot?
I think the big part of that is, again, the objections have to be part of your process. You have to plan on those. So you got to keep your list of what are the objections, and you got to, have know how you're going to address each of those objections in a, reasonable way. The better, if you're prepared for it, most objections can be overcome fairly easily, unless you're just not a good fit, in which case you probably don't want to do that job anyway. But
Mhm.
there are reasonable, uh, there are set ways to overcome objections, right?
Yeah.
And you just
Since
have to have those, in the can for you to pull up when you need them.
What would you say, like, have top 30 objections that you kind of train
It's
yourself and your
I,
team on, or what?
I'd say it's a lot less than that, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
You can't, what you want to do is kind of generalize the objections. The objections typically are going to be price, they're going to be timing, and they may be um, a squishy concern, like, do you hire your own people? Do you do background checks on them? Do you those kinds of personnel type questions, and
Mm,
who's actually going to do my work questions. But I think there's probably five or six areas that you need to be prepared for with
okay.
objections that kind of cover the basis of most of them. Price is probably the most common one. Um, and that's the one that you just got to be prepared to talk about your company and what you do, that's your differentiator. And
I'm
if someone has
guessing.
a
Oh, I'm just saying. I'm guessing even through the estimating process, you could almost build into, again, your routine and your
right,
system that's planned on, scripted.
right,
As you're
right,
doing stuff, you let people know, by the way, da, da, da,
hmm,
almost kind of, again, priming them so that they kind of already have the answers to it by the time that they get to the end.
right,
Um, but I think also
totally,
you could source some of the, like, well, what questions people ask? What should I? Well, talk to your team. Ask
yeah,
ask what you write down what you've heard. Ask your team
yeah,
what they've heard. Put them into some categories so it's kind of easier to learn them.
right,
STG sales transformation group, they do a lot of role playing, and
right,
they truly are given case
yeah,
scenarios for their employees, for their sales team, and running them through. If you were asked this
yeah,
question, how would you answer? And they make them answer as if they were the customer. They're
yeah,
answering the customer.
totally works. Yeah,
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great idea.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Role playing is one of the best things you can do. You
yeah.
can accomplish a lot quickly with doing role playing.
And the principle here is, even if people aren't, like you said, even if it's not a fit for everyone to sign on the spot, you're really getting them as close to possible to making a decision in their head that this is the direction they
Right,
want to go. Before you leave there, you want them more or
right,
less to think, I want this company. Because if you leave,
right.
they're not really sure I want this company. That's
Hmm.
a big open door. A lot of companies and other bids
Big
can
open
close
door.
that door.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I think it's a
And the
good.
reality is, there are also a lot of charlatans out there that are selling you a bill of goods, and
Right.
you could get eaten by one of those guys. And, well, shame on the prospect for not going for the quality. That happens.
Yeah.
But there's some you don't want to lose to that. So
Right.
you got to be prepared for
That's a good
sure.
point. It's good talk. I know we're going to try to get to some very practical ideas like this. I know sometimes we stay big strategy, but getting into, because we see a lot of the processes of the contractors that we work with. We
Right.
see what's working, we see what's not working. So we're trying to get into the granular a little bit and say, hey, don't know if you guys know about this, but there's some tricks here that could
Yeah.
help. So I like it. So
Yeah, it's really does boil a lot down to the processes and just planning it out. And regardless of whether you close on the spot, that having that process down is an important thing for you to do. It works whether
yeah,
you're closing on the spot on your first visit or your second visit, whenever you're doing it. Having a process and knowing what the sequence is going to help you to be more confident when you're going in to do the presentations, and to close more deals. Just being practiced and polished gives people confidence in you, that you know what you're talking about, and you're not, a bullshitter, and you're someone they want to do business with.
let me. I want to throw out a last thing. Maybe let's take another 5 minutes to talk about. But there is a salesperson.
Hmm.
Forgot what his name was. Maybe I'll put it in show notes if I think about it. He had this sales process. He said it was get to know.
Hmm.
Keep getting people with yeses, yeses, yes, until you get a no on something. Because what he
Yeah.
said, and tell me what you think about this, he
Yeah.
said that once they are able to say no, it's kind of empowering
Right.
to them. But then you know where the edges are and you could back up to get another yes. So it's
Right.
almost like you granted a customer their power back to say no to something so they don't feel like they're being swindled or manipulated. And then
Right.
you're saying, oh, actually, I like knowing that that's not what you want. Is this more of,
Right.
oh, so it almost is like you're giving them more of what they want, not just what you want them to want. Do you
Right.
think that's an effective tool in that
Uh,
process, in the sales
I
process?
think there's a lot to that. I think it's probably the opposite of what most of the sales gurus teach,
Right.
but I recall hearing, and I can't remember who the person was that pushes that one. But I get that. It was the when once you get to know, then I think the way I've also heard that is when you get the know, you've also found their pain point potentially. So
Okay.
now you know what as long as they keep saying yes, all right, they're going along, but there's usually is something, there's some hesitation or there's some no in there. And if you get them to know, then you know how to approach it to finish this off. Whereas until you get to that no, or "Oh, I'm not sure," or whatever, you don't know where everything's going fine. Are they gonna sign? And I
Right.
guess the no could be, all right, everything sounds good. Are you ready to sign? And when they say no, and you go, okay, well, let's talk about this. What
Okay.
what are you what are your concerns? And you can find out what their real hangups might be. And it might just be, well, I really have to tell my husband about it. Well, can you get him on the now? Listen, I'm not good at this. I will freely admit, but I've heard people that are great at it, and they would say, "Hey, any possibility we can get him on the phone? It sounds like what we've talked about so far sounds like what you want to do. If we get him on the phone, maybe we can talk to him, because ideally, if you want to get this done in the short term, the sooner we lock it in, the better chance that we're going to be able to get the job done for you when you want it done."
And I
That
imagine,
sounded really good, didn't it, Chris?
yeah, that's really good. I think it's great. The other thing with that too is, hey, do you think that I could answer some questions that you may not know how to answer if your husband or your spouse was asking about it?
Right.
Then I could
Sure.
make that a little bit easier on you. You're kind of relieving them of
Right.
the burden to have to share all the details, and it's
Yeah.
almost like I could do you some. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
those are all. There's a lot there. There's a lot of opportunity that's probably unrecognized, so thus
Yeah.
unutilized by a lot of salespeople. So getting your systems right, honing it, trying,
Yeah.
do some trial and error for a few
Right.
months and say, hey, we're not sure about these things. Let's see how it works out there in the field. And then you can build the answer right into your process. That should probably be always evolving, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And again, you might, if you go out and there's some great books on sales, you may read a couple books, and you may find that this one is just not, it's sort of like the story of the three bears. This one's like, nah, I can never do that. That's just not my style. I gotta, but there might be some good stuff in there. And then check another one, like, no, no, that's on the opposite extreme. And then you find the middle bear, the mama bear, and it's like, oh, I like that, but I'm going to take this piece from this one and this piece from this one and incorporate that, and then I've got my sales process, which is a combination of some, all the different styles and things out there. Because you have to consider when you come up with your process, you do have to consider your business. Like
Yeah.
every business is different. Every business has slightly different focus. So you read this sales methodology book of one person. Well, there may be great concepts in there, but those concepts might not apply specifically to how you want to do things, or you take the things you need to win, but not the things that aren't
Yeah.
don't fit you or your philosophy or your personality or whatever, to make sure you get a
That's fair.
winning combo.
That's fair. That's totally fair. And
Hmm.
it takes a little bit of the pain of trying to learn new things, or diminishes the pain because if it doesn't feel like you, don't have, it just learn the things. You could
Right.
let go of the
Right.
things that aren't you, take the things that are,
Absolutely.
takes the fear out of learning maybe a little bit because it can be overwhelming thinking, I got to do all this. Oh,
Totally.
no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't feel right. It's okay. Those don't
Yeah.
feel right. One or two
Exactly.
things, you know?
Yep.
But anyway, I think that's all good discussion.
Cool.
Thank you for your time today on Estimate Rocket Radio.
Awesome. My pleasure, Chris. Always enjoy it.